in the morning, they can look and see where every person that they are monitoring with that GPS monitoring system was at the time of that offense. And so they can either narrow the field down and find the suspect who may have been in the area at the time that the crime was committed, or completely alleviate all those people as potential suspects. And what they found as far as the recidivism rate, it's almost nil, because these people know they're going to get caught if they do the crime. It's 24/7 monitoring. So I think Kentucky needs to move forward. Some other states, we've been meeting with folks from Tennessee and some states that are moving forward with this GPS monitoring. It's a way to let nonviolent people out of jail, people who don't have any real serious crimes or heinous crimes in their backgrounds, and monitor them and keep our society safe and satisfy the prosecutors and reduce our cost. The cost of these monitoring devices are somewhere between $7 and $10. It depends upon how you play with the numbers and who gets the contract, how many people are involved. But it's really it has tremendous potential. It has tremendous potential to save the counties a lot of money. I know a lot of you probably do business with counties or involved some way in county government. Under our current system, the county, from the time that the defendant's arrested and placed in jail until the time that he's convicted, the county pays for that incarceration. Now, counties complain about that all the time, Mr. President. This is a way to get those people out of jail instead of paying the $38 or $40 or whatever it costs to keep them there for a day. They can put them under a GPS monitoring system, know their whereabouts 24/7, and at a cost of about $7 a day. So it doesn't take a long time to figure out how much money can actually be saved, and you can do it without having to go through the political struggle of having prosecutors versus public defense attorneys versus judges. One of the big problems we have, quite frankly, in Kentucky is the fact that judges tend to over-sentence. The prosecutor may recommend a minimum or a moderate sentence, but the judges who don't want to be seen as being soft on crime tend to give the maximum sentences in a lot of these cases, which means that under the parole guidelines, these people have to stay incarcerated a bit longer. So there needs, I think, to be some adjustment made there. And, we've actually been looking at perhaps figuring out a way where the court, the Pew system study is going to be really wonderful. It's going to talk about a lot of things that other states are doing, but it's going to talk really about how you identify people that may be repeat offenders. That's kind of the basis to all these studies. How you do enough screening, enough monitoring, enough background checks to make sure that these people that do get let out of jail on parole don't create a problem again. That's the whole fear factor. Well, with the GPS monitoring system, we can almost alleviate that concern overnight. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it or aren't as familiar with it as maybe you a lot of other people. I've been a private pilot for about 30 years, and we've been using GPS monitoring or GPS mapping systems in private aviation for about 15 years. And we're just now sort of getting into use in the general population. And we see them in cars and all these sorts of things. Now, they work everywhere. There's some misinformation that you may have heard that they don't work in some places. They work everywhere. Now, the real-time monitoring that's associated with them relies upon cell tower coverage and cell phone coverage. And so, yes, there are places in Kentucky where the cell phone coverage is inadequate. That doesn't mean the device won't tell you where the person is, and it doesn't mean that you can't utilize it to create what we call an exclusion zone or an inclusion zone. In other words, you can exclude people from going in certain areas. You can include them into certain areas. Really a remarkable system. And for those of you who are interested, the Fayette County Metro Government, Sergeant Hubbard, has a wonderful presentation, a PowerPoint presentation that's just unbelievable. And the success they've had over there, it's just phenomenal.
Other than the use of the GPS devices and keeping an open mind about what Pew might recommend, the Prosecutors Association, to my knowledge, has come around on a couple of points. Do you think that the General Assembly would be open to, if there is a recommendation on the reclassification of certain either misdemeanor or felony offenses? Will that be studied? That's something that Professor Lawson has recommended that hasn't occurred.
Well, Professor Lawson, very learned in the penal code. Some people say he wrote the penal code, but it's been amended many, many times since then. There are just certain identifiable sections of the penal code that are problematic. I don't think that at this particular juncture you'll see the General Assembly undertaking a rewriting of the entire penal code. That's a long and a very involved sort of situation. But we have certain offenses that can be identified. You have child support offenses, for example. You have bad checks. You have a lot of things like that, some of the activity is borderline criminal activity. You have those sort of things that people need to look at. And the problem is that once someone is convicted of a Class D felon on one of those situations, if they become involved in anything else, prosecutors use the repeat offender laws in order to get people to enter pleas and avoid trials. The other thing that you see happen, Bill, is that you have what are called pretrial diversions, and people will enter a nolo contendere or an Alfred plea sometimes, which means they don't actually admit their guilt in these situations, but they have a pretrial diversion, and if they complete this diversion situation, they won't be convicted felons, and they'll have a certain amount of supervision during that time. Well, a lot of people that are accused of drug offenses will choose those, and without the proper treatment, and even with the proper treatment, they're going to have problems. They're going to, as some of the country Methodists where I'm from say, they will backslide on you a little bit. They'll have they'll slip and they'll have a use of a drug because they are addicted to these sort of things. And in many courts, you have drug courts, Greg, and you and I know that judges and probation and parole officers understand this, and that they'll put someone in jail for 10 days and then let them have another try and put them in treatment. And then you have other courts and other jurisdictions in the state that will revoke that pretrial diversion, and they become a convicted felon on a case that they might or might not have been able to win at trial. And at that juncture, they are a convicted felon. It becomes more difficult for them to get employment. And if they have another situation with a drug possession situation, and I have found that virtually anyone that will use a prescription drug or an illegal drug can be charged with trafficking at some particular juncture, because if they lose their work ethic, they get low on the money, they have to support their habit. You don't actually have to sell a drug to someone to be guilty of trafficking. You can give a drug to someone and you'll be guilty. So then you get into trafficking, and they got a recidivism situation, and it's on and on. So I agree with the speaker that community corrections are a piece of the puzzle, but when you have that person with the ankle bracelet on, you're going to have some wraparound services that are necessary. Some training requirements, some drug treatment requirements, some of those other sorts of things. And then you have people that are just violent criminals. And we must make sure that we have room in the penitentiary and in the jails for that. One problem that speaks to, Mr. Speaker, and I think you'll agree with that, once we take a look at the correction system, when you start dropping people out of correctional institutions, there's going to be the challenge with county jails and with state penitentiaries on who houses the Class D felons. And in those of you that do not know the street jargon of felonies, the most horrendous felonies are capital felonies, Class A felonies. You have Class B felonies, Class C felonies, and Class D. D felonies are 1 to 5 years, and they can be virtually, that's the entry-level amateur felon at that particular situation. And at that level, nonviolent felons many times are housed under contract with county governments. And some county governments have built jails predicated on that population being available. And then we have state penitentiaries and private prisons that we've entered into contracts with. So if we start reducing the prison population, we're also going to have a penal plan to determine where these people are going to be housed and what sort of facilities. And I do believe that we can have a reasonable discussion in the Kentucky General Assembly, because the financial